Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, forget it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. We got a few things on the docket for today. The NBA in a cold war with their TV partners. Everybody jockeying for position. And we're going to hear from an executive that gives great insight to what's going on in between the lines. And also Kyrie Irving. He's still talking about his Brooklyn exit and what went down in New York. And we'll also hear from Bradley Beal on his exit from the Wizards, how Miami was his preferred choice. So right now, the NBA and their TV partners are pretty much in the eve of their negotiations, as it will take place in the spring of 2024. But we're seeing this cold war play out between the two, where each of them is jockeying for leverage and positioning over the other. And a prime example of this was their first Thursday night of nationally televised games. Now, during that day, Adam Silver had made remarks about how their TV partners, the business they operate under, which is cable TV, is an outdated business. Let's go to the ChatGPT.
We recognize that, in some ways, the decline of cable has disproportionately impacted the NBA. Commissioner Adam Silver told Yahoo Sports, "Our young audience isn't subscribing to cable, and those fans aren't finding our games. There are still roughly 65 million homes in America that are consuming sports in a very traditional way, and even more people on network TV. Is that declining? Yes. Is that going away anytime soon? I don't believe so. So we want to be on all those platforms," Silver said.
Now, Adam Silver said he wants to be on all those platforms, and also he wants the NBA to be accessible to fans. But if the tech companies like Amazon end up coming onto the scene, it's going to play out where some of the games might be harder for fans to find if they want to see a particular game, as we've seen it play out with Thursday Night Football in the NFL. And that's one of the reasons ESPN and TNT might be looking at this with a side eye. The fact that the NBA wants double the money, but they want their games accessible, but yet they may end up signing deals similar to the NFL, which makes their games hard to find. But surprisingly enough, ESPN had a very interesting take the same night after these comments came out from Adam Silver on a TNT nationally televised game. Now let's take a listen to what ESPN employee Woj had tweeted out.
ESPN asked the NBA about James Harden and new player participation policy. League is investigating. NBA spokesman Mike Bays, "We're looking into the facts around James Harden's availability tonight to determine whether an approved reason exists for his lack of participation."
Now that was the first tweet of two. But why is ESPN so concerned about a TNT nationally televised game? And I wouldn't be shocked if TNT somewhat collaborated with ESPN on those efforts to make sure that their existing priorities of just making sure the NBA product has their superstars on the floor for these nationally televised games. This is almost similar to when we see other big national corporations that are rivals collaborate together in order to evade something like regulation or just their product becoming weaker. We've seen this play out with TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter and other social media platforms when they ban certain polarizing figures on social media. It's almost like they fear regulation. But let's see what Woj had to say in the second tweet about ESPN asking the NBA, why is James Harden not playing in this nationally televised game?
Philadelphia is playing a national TV game against Milwaukee tonight, which requires the Sixers to provide the league with a valid explanation for why a healthy recent All-Star isn't playing. Harden returned to the Sixers on Wednesday after being away for 10 days on what team and player described as a personal matter.
So among that second tweet from Woj also followed a link and a full story from ESPN on the situation with James Harden, and also them inquiring to the NBA about why he wasn't playing. A lot of Cold War games are going on in this eve of a massive TV deal negotiation. And the cable market is definitely weakening, which is a huge part of TNT's and ESPN's business model. But one thing for sure is that the league is definitely going to ask for more money And not only they're asking for more money, they're also asking to have the product more widely available to customers, which definitely goes against the cable business model. And the NBA is going to have more partners besides TNT and ESPN. You know, a tech company is definitely going to come into play here. As in Silver's own comments, he wants to collaborate with partners that's going to give the games available to where their customers are at. So with a lot of things shaking up before the NBA gets into their national TV deals, we're going to get insight to what's going on with their local TV deals, which is pretty much falling apart as we've seen Discovery completely get out of that business overall. And one of the NBA's largest partners for their local TV deals, Bally Sports, aka Diamond Sports, has filed for bankruptcy, which has caused teams like the Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns to kind of pivot away from those local deals and kind of form their own networks. Some of the NBA teams have even collaborated with baseball teams like the Houston Rockets and also the Portland Trail Blazers. But Rob Thunn of DirecTV acknowledged what Adam Silver said about the generational shift.
And I don't think millennials watch sports to the same degree. They certainly don't watch TV to the same degree. We didn't grow up with TikTok, but that's a phenomenon that people like to watch, and it gets a lot of eyeballs. So people have the time is really the measurement that's shared across all these things, and they spend their time in different things than just linear TV. And if we price linear TV too expensively, you're almost forcing their hand to go watch it in spend their time with their eyeballs doing different things than watching pay TV.
And the local TV deals are the first ones to suffer because of this, mainly. A lot of people in those local markets have opted out of those plans. And about 15 of these NBA teams could swallow this loss for now until that national TV deal kicks in. But Rob Thunn of DirecTV also acknowledged how some of their partners have now become their competitors. As a lot of entities like the NBA, the NFL, they do offer direct-to-consumer packages. So it's changing the way the money is being made and how much money is being made. And the inflated price of a lot of these sports packages is being reflected onto the consumer. And now customers are just leaving because pretty much they've begun to realize that they're priced out.
And unfortunately, the economics seem to keep going up and up. And that's driven us into the problem of the declining pay TV business because the entry-level price of our packages are too high for customers. And they've decided to sort of tap out of pay TV and look to cobble together their own experiences. And it's unfortunate that we're at this place, but that's where we are. We want to know where the content itself resides, what we're competing with against the programmer itself, who used to not be a competitor. They were just a supplier. Now they're a supplier and a competitor. So what are the rights digitally, and what do we get, and what are they trying to keep for themselves, and how do we square that? I mean, I think what you saw in the Charter Disney deal, which was, I think, a watershed deal for the industry, is that, and we were out here fighting the same thing years ago. We were trying to get it such that whatever the D2C product was, the direct consumer product was, of a particular programmer, that our customers who are already getting most of those channels and that content through their subscription to us would have free access to their direct consumer product. And we were out there first to try to get that what we call the don't pay twice principle. And we got coupons effectively for customers who wanted to subscribe to those direct consumer products from the likes of Discovery Plus, from the likes of AMC Plus, Paramount Plus, Peacock, where we got a 40% off coupon for our customers. Charter got a 100% off coupon, and they're plugging in those D2C products as part of the subscription now into their subscription for Spectrum. That was an important move, and in order to make room for that, they also culled out a lot of what I'd call longer tail channels or secondary or tertiary channels of the particular portfolios of these programmers that don't get a lot of viewership. They're really just jammed into deals to get money out of distributors. The price of pay TV has gotten too high. They're hobbies for these programming shops that don't throw off a lot of cash anyway. Those should go away, and we should retrench the programming into the channels that they have that are the flagship channels.
That's the main thing that's actually inflating the price. It's almost like ESPN having their main channel, but having the NBA Finals on ABC. Then they force a company like DirecTV to carry that package with ABC. You see what they're doing? There's a lot of companies that do that. MTV does that with MTV2. You know, even with news networks, C-SPAN and C-SPAN 2. It seems like the bundling was an old way. Networks used to kind of finesse the large cable companies, but now it's not working anymore because the audience is pretty much begin to tune out, and there's a lot more options than there ever was before with social media and also streaming services.
And too often I'm seeing the same bit of content ported across multiple channels of a particular portfolio. You see Monday Night Football that used to be exclusively in ESPN going to ABC. You see, the Manning cast as it relates to that as well. So ESPN2, ESPN, ABC are all getting effectively the same game with different variations of it. Not to pick on ESPN, Disney, they're not alone. You see a lot of duplicate broadcasts across portfolios, and we don't need to pay twice for that kind of stuff. The shell game of programming cost needs to end, and we need to get more rationalized pricing so that we keep more customers in the pay TV ecosystem. And if we don't, then the programmers who are going to go direct to consumer and lose customers from us now have to, if we lose one customer, every one of the major programming shops needs to pick up that subscription for that customer with their D2C products. And we know that's not going to happen. It just isn't. So it's kind of crazy that we've gotten to this point, and it doesn't seem like logic prevailed.
And that right there is the cable companies acknowledging a lot of these entities like the NFL, the NBA, ESPN, they cannot survive on direct to consumer. More than about 60 to 70% of their whole business is funded by them. So going the direct to consumer route is actually not going to be as lucrative as going through the national cable companies.
How program deals were done. But here we are, and now we have to try to re-rationalize this. And I think the Charter Disney deal was a good first step in towards reconstituting how these deals are done in a way that are most advantageous for customers.
And the Charter Disney battle was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call to a lot of the programmers. Like, hey, this free bundling money that you were getting, where people just wasn't watching ESPN but still was paying that large package fee, those free money days are over. And the biggest thing that came out of that battle was Charter actually saying that, hey, Disney, we're no longer subsidizing holding your packages anymore. We actually could tell our customers to subscribe directly to your product or other subscription services. The cable companies have begun to push back and admit that it's more lucrative for them just to have internet-only customers. So pushback like that is going to have a trickle-down effect going into other negotiations. But Rob Thun also elaborated on how the RSN business got here and how networks like ESPN got way too expensive to maintain, and they're not going to be a good business model going forward, especially due to the fact that the TV bubble is beginning to burst.
Why we even got here with Diamond Sports and RSNs in general is because the model was broken. The rights just kept going up and up and up, and the actual viewership or the demand for these local sports, while there are some that engage very heavily in watching their local teams, the lion's share of people do not watch RSNs, at least on our dial. And I think it's fairly common across all the other distributors. It's the same concern that the prices didn't match the viewership. And so we're overpaying for these rights, and they need to be re-rationalized. And
we're seeing this play out in Major League Baseball also with the Diamondbacks and the Padres. Shit, the Diamondbacks are in the World Series. But yet, just like how Rob said earlier, the demand does not match up with the pricing.
Folks like Dish dropped out of the RSN business. You have new digital players that are scaling up that don't carry these networks because they aren't efficient. They're too cost intensive, like YouTube and Hulu, except for the NBC portfolio, which were leveraged as part of those overall NBC deals. So there was no way for Hulu or YouTube to avoid that carriage. But where they were just dealing with straight conversations with DSG, or they were dealing them with all these other independent RSNs, they just simply said no thanks. And so to then say, well, here's the way we're going to do it now, we're going to move it to broadcast and let them try to impose their leverage into the negotiations to force carriage. I think we're going to see a replay of this down the road because the broadcast stations are also too expensive, and they've been asking for crazy increases over the years, and we're hitting a point where do the broadcast channels make sense? And we saw this movie already. Sinclair broadcaster who owned DSG wasn't able to use their leverage to put the RSNs into the Dish deal, which then started to unravel the whole business model. I think we're going to see more broadcast fights if the broadcasters are going to try to assume these rights and then impose them upon us. We had a pretty lengthy fight with Nexstar this summer. We're off with two station groups, White Knight and Mission. It's over a year now that we haven't carried the stations of those particular companies that are owned by Nexstar. You have Dish, who is currently off with Hearst, Cox, White Knight, and Mission. And you saw Comcast jump in the fray to a smaller network group. So the broadcast model isn't the silver bullet of answers, either from an economic future long-term basis, or certainly full delivery to all the fans out there, given the limitations of what I just talked about. So I see warning signals for broadcasters jumping in here.
Now, Diamond Sports is one of the NBA's biggest local TV partners, and that bankruptcy kind of left a lot of teams in flux on how they were going to get their games distributed, as we've seen it play out with the Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, Portland Trail Blazers, and the Houston Rockets, as some of those franchises have collaborated with baseball teams to create their own networks and their own direct-to-consumer product. And even an interesting team like the Phoenix Suns, if you live down in Arizona and you got an antenna, you could watch their games for free. So the local TV business has really begun to pop, and that has a lot to do with the national TV deals. It's sort of a trickle-down effect. If there's a bubble up top, some of that trickled down to the bottom. And as we see how it's playing out now, a lot of those local deals were definitely inflated. And like Rob Thun has said earlier, the demand has to somewhat meet the price, and it has to be lucrative for all parties involved. And he hints at the possibility that the NBA needs to approach some of these larger cable networks similar to the way Major League Baseball did.
Well, it sort of went to what I was saying earlier, that we do want to continue to carry local sports where it makes sense. And we worked a deal with them where we would continue to carry them and distribute them where we originally did. There are no pockets where customers weren't going to get access to it. But there's a recognition that the rights have to be modulated and fixed to some degree. And so we stepped in and said, look, we'll be a distributor for you and ensure that we get the games to our customers and that we will pay you for those rights. We're still waiting for the rebates from Diamond to make those payments for those two particular teams. But, we support local sports if we can figure out the model to be adjusted in a way where the demand matches the economics. And currently where we have to over distribute to customers who don't even subscribe to the packages that have the RSNs. And that's part of our problem.
Yeah, so they're forcing even your grandmother to buy these big expensive packages when she don't even watch sports at all. She just needs a basic package, but the basic package includes all these sports networks at inflated prices. That's how they pretty much give it to most customers at a decent price. Even the customer that wants the sports package, the price that they see, even though, to a lot of people that's pretty high to begin with, but it would even be higher if they couldn't force Grandma Annie that's down the block, if they didn't force her to get a basic package with at least some sports channels. So that price would definitely even be higher. But with all this influx, especially on the local TV side, players like DirecTV and just other cable companies are going to be looking to lock the NBA into these local deals for a much longer period of time, which is something the NBA probably does not want to do. Once again, these cable companies are playing their position. They're putting the NBA in a rock and a hard place. It's not like they could say no, and it's not like they could say yes. They got to compromise at some point. The NBA might not be able to fully use their leverage as being one of the only live television products that have value. It's pretty much sports right now is the only live television product that's really valuable to most of these cable companies or just networks to get views and to apply the old business model of just running a bunch of ads and commercial breaks. But let's see what Rob had to say about the possible approach with the NBA.
We're very anxious to see where this all goes because it's very unclear. We're sitting here today and we're having conversations with the NBA because they're not sure what's going to happen with Diamond. And so what contingencies have to be in place if the rug gets pulled out from underneath the teams and they go back to the NBA? Can we be the conduit to distribute the teams in the same fashion as we do today? And the answer is we're working on that. what that deal ultimately looks like, we'd have to then figure out, and it has to go into that same kind of mathematical equation that we have to pay less for the local rights and have it match the demand of the package that they currently reside in. But sure, I mean, where the local rights go, it keeps me up at night as to what we need to do and where that, and not knowing what the answer is going to be as fluid as it is. It has a lot of people up at night as to what we do here, and not just me, probably other people in my chair and other distribution shops. We can be a stopgap, whether a short term or a longer term. But we'd like to see a longer term model with the leagues in play, but not every one of them is going to want to go there. And so, unfortunately, what used to be housed in a nice basket of more uniform distribution of RSNs is going to splinter out, and you're going to have certain markets like in Phoenix where you've got broadcasters delivering to the teams and a league delivering the other team. And for those fans who like all three teams, you're going to need a secret decoder ring to know where they all now went. And imagine then being someone working in a call center of ours trying to explain to customers who don't know where the games have gone, in this market it's this, in this market is X, this market it's Y, et cetera, permeate that across all the different markets in the country and the different teams. That's a hard thing to communicate to customers, and it's not going to be clean or tidy in any way.
And it sounds like from what the NBA wants, it's not going to be clean either way, because if they collaborate with the tech companies, it will be that confusing for a lot of fans to just figure out where some of these games are, as it is for the NFL with that Thursday night football and other leagues like the MLS and NHL. But this situation is a bit of a clusterfuck because the NBA is going to throw a monkey wrench and ask a lot of these networks to actually make their products more available and not behind a cable TV paywall. That's a conundrum right there. But it'd be very interesting to see if the NBA could actually use their full leverage on these networks and get the highest price possible without destroying their TV partners, because their partners are definitely beginning to navigate in a new landscape on how this money is going to be made. But we're definitely seeing all the players jock for position as we see the NBA making policies to make sure that star players show up for certain nationally televised games. We're seeing distributors like DirecTV ask for longer local TV network deals. And we're seeing networks like ESPN/Disney in the battle with Charter kind of figure out where they're going to fall in this new whole business structure. There's definitely a lot of moving parts, but we'll see how it plays out. Now, Bradley Beal had did a sit down where he gave us insight on his transition going from the Washington Wizards to the Phoenix Suns. And interesting enough, he spoke about how the Wizards made that decision for him and how Miami was his preferred destination, but Mickey Arison did not want to pull the trigger due to future salary cap implications. But Bradley Beal this season has been put in the same position as Damian Lillard, where they're stars in the league, but they've finally been put in position where we could see what they could do at the highest level. But Bradley Beal was definitely approached by the Washington Wizards' new front office, and he gave insight to how they just kind of straight up told him, hey, it's time to make that transition. Let's see what he had to say. Let's go to ChatGPT.
When I realized it was time, it probably wasn't until Wizards had a new front office in place and we had a very straightforward conversation about the direction in which the team needed to go, Beal said. And probably for the first time, that is, when I would say, this past summer is when I fully accepted it is time to move on. As crazy as it sounds, it definitely was like a gut punch. But at the same time, it was uplifting. It was uplifting to know that the organization that I dedicated my career to kind of gave me the pat on the back and saying it's okay to go seek a trade and go where you feel like you can compete. And so, that's why I always respect Washington, because I wouldn't be where I am today without their help and their facilitation and everything. I needed the push, and it was because I was probably going mad over there and just trying to make it work and figuring it out. But to actually hear that, honestly, probably from the first time within that organization, it was an eye-opener. The decision was made for me in a way, and it kind of eased the process.
It's almost like the John Wall situation fully didn't work out, and them not being able to recoup any draft picks kind of left the franchise in flux when they just had Bradley Beal left over. That's why this past offseason we've seen the importance of recouping after your star leaves your team in the case of the Portland Trail Blazers. They made sure to secure their future with Damian Lillard leaving that team. And Beal also spoke on Miami being his preferred destination, but the Miami Heat, even though being a large market, their owner Mickey Arison has always operated that franchise from a mom and pop standpoint. And it seems like they did not want to pay the price to have Beal, or they thought possibly Beal could not move the needle like that for the price that he was at, especially with that no trade clause.
So, my initial favorite was Miami. And so, we call Miami. Pat Riley says, well, I'll go talk to Mickey Arison and figure it out. And I respect and love every team, but a lot of them just couldn't do it because the money was just so high. And with our new CBA and the luxury tax, a lot of owners just was like, we don't want to get hit over the head with that. And that's a respectable decision. If I was the ownership and I'm pouring in billions of dollars, I want to make sure we're getting a championship out of it too. I'm like, okay, what's Miami doing? Dragging feet. And eventually it came to a point to where Miami said they just can't do it. But it was an eye-opener for sure. And that's why I said I went into everything kind of open-minded and with an open slate. And out of nowhere here comes a dark horse in Phoenix, and their aggressiveness pushed me over the top. Milwaukee was very close in the running as well, but they were going to make some moves that I didn't necessarily like in the trade, too. So, I guess that's the beauty of having a no-trade clause. You get to have a little bit of say-so in the deal. Having so many teams pursuing me so hard was really cool. But in the end, man, it ultimately just felt like Phoenix picked me.
Now, a few things I want to point out. First of all, Bradley Beal having that no-trade clause kind of left the Wizards in the same position that they were in when they traded John Wall. They were still unable to recoup assets for their stars. This seems to be a going theme from the results of the previous front office. And with Phoenix just over pursuing Bradley Beal, I wonder if it has a lot to do with the owner purchasing that team for $4 billion, and he's making sure that evaluation stays up. As we've seen it play out with Giannis re-signing his extension, the new owner of the Bucks was definitely pressed that Giannis stayed with the team. As the previous owner, rumors were circling around that he sold the team because he thought Giannis was leaving and he was afraid of the evaluation going down. So a lot of these teams already have stars. That net worth is tied to that star being there. So it's very pivotal that when they're trading away stars, or just stars are getting ready to go, that they get an asset back for them. They get first round picks back, or just something back to secure that future. So going back to the Heat, from what Beal is saying, Miami continued to drag their feet on this trade, and they eventually dragged their feet later on that summer with the Damian Lillard trade. I'm wondering what's going on over there. Once again, their owner operates that franchise from a mom and pop standpoint. Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal's price tag is really high. I'm wondering if that scared Mickey Arison off. But just going on to the future, it's going to be very hard for Mickey Arison to compete with a lot of these new NBA franchise owners, because they're going to want to keep these evaluations up, and they're not going to be afraid to dip into the tax for a season or two. But Beal mentioning Milwaukee, this is interesting. Let's go back to that.
Milwaukee was very close in the running as well, but they were going to make some moves that I didn't necessarily like in the trade, too. So, I guess that's the beauty of having a no-trade clause.
I wonder if right there he rejected the Milwaukee trade. And remember, this was a few months before the Damian Lillard trade. It seems like once Milwaukee's offseason kicked off, they were looking to shake shit up. But once again, with the Wizards, unfortunately, they were unable to really recoup any assets when they traded away their stars. Bradley Beal's no-trade clause came back to bite them in the ass. And due to the situation with John Wall, they were unable to recoup any real assets for him due to the fact that he was coming off an injury. But Bradley Beal this season, we're going to see what he's made of. He's going to be performing at the highest level along with KD. So we're finally going to get to see how Beal performs in major, big playoff situations. So this will be a finale to my series, Friends in the City, starring Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. As back in 2019, I had stated, these two reminded me of two good friends that were going to become roommates, and they were really going to get to know each other when they lived under the same roof. And this situation could only turn out going very well, or it could go completely left. But there was never going to be a middle ground. And in this conclusion, we're going to hear from Kyrie Irving about how he felt on his Brooklyn Nets exit. Now, before we get to Kyrie on his thoughts, reflecting on his time with the Nets, I just want to say this about KD and Kyrie's whole experiment in Brooklyn. I knew things were going to go left when I heard KD tell Hot 97 radio station in New York City that he thought the Brooklyn Nets was quiet. We wanted to go somewhere where we just played basketball and it was quiet. I was like, KD has no idea how New York media is like. The whole situation with the pandemic and with Kyrie kind of having the 3 strikes against the media. First of all, requesting a trade away from LeBron was strike 1, as LeBron James has a powerful grasp in the media. Strike 2 was going to Boston, which is another capital of the NBA media, and kind of almost betraying that franchise. Strike 3 was him actually winning his case of not taking the jab during the pandemic and being able to play for the Brooklyn Nets afterwards. And then on top of that, I'll give him a strike 4. There's no such thing as a strike 4, but god damn, the strike while he was down anyway, it was him making comments about a certain religious group. But he reflected on his time in Brooklyn and what led to his exit. You guys check it out, and every once in a while I'll check in.
As you told us last year, you had never been traded in the middle of a year.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have closure with Brooklyn?
What do you mean closure?
Well, just like how everything's
you said it like I was in a full-blown...
Well, you leave in the middle of a season.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you're on good terms with the organization and just...
I mean, I was never on bad terms with the organization. I just think there was a lot of chaos and noise as usual from the media. I'm not going to blame you guys or anything, but again, nobody really knew what was going on behind the scenes, and I'm sure that people have their sources they go to and what was going on and what really happened. But for me, it was the best decision of my career, just to be able to ask for a trade. I knew I needed peace of mind. It was rough all the way around.
Wow. James Harden had the same sentiment when he left Brooklyn, and he even made comments after Kyrie got traded.
You know, after COVID and after the situations that took place there, circumstances that were either in my control or out of my control.
AKA the New York mayor put in that ban on players not getting the jab in order to play, which made no sense. So as long as you play for a New York City team, you had to take the jab. If you didn't play for a New York City team, you were still allowed to play in those games. You didn't have to take the jab. It didn't make any sense. But Kyrie went back and forth with the New York City mayor, and he ended up winning that battle because the mayor eventually had to lift up his ban.
And I didn't want to play the blame game. You know, like I said, I had a media interview and I said there was some disrespectful things going on behind the scenes. And that happens in every organization as an employee. So it's not out of the ordinary to come out and communicate that. But again, when it's me, it's a fire starter. Everyone loves to use my name to build up whatever credibility they need.
And a lot of media members in New York did that. They sort of used Kyrie and him being part of the Nets. They sort of attached the Nets as anti-jab. They're the anti-jab group. Look at Kyrie. Kyrie's allowed to be in the arena, getting that courtside seat. That was him showing up the New York mayor. But people within that organization were upset that the Nets were sort of tied to being anti-jab, especially in New York. When it comes to that particular topic, one side kind of trumps the other, and Kyrie definitely went against that grain.
And at the end of the day, I don't have a problem with that. I think my criticism is fair as long as you keep it on the court and judge me off the success of our team. And don't try to dig too deep into who I am as a person, because I don't show who I am as a person in this business, because it's always constant eyewitness views of, you know, just random things that I don't necessarily agree with is being written about me. So I do my best to separate the two between having a work-life balance.
I wish KD does that more. But KD, with these burner accounts, he cares too much about what people think of him. I think now he's starting to find balance within that.
But the closure that you're talking about, man, is, you know, I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to play this game. That's a media straightforward answer that you'll get from me on that.
And Kyrie going against that jab, I mean, you can tell what the climate was, especially in Golden State, when you seen Wiggins actually turn around and end up taking the jab anyway. He was outnumbered. He was completely outnumbered. And it's the same thing in New York. As you see the other professional NBA team, the Knicks, everyone took the jab. There was no questions asked. You got to understand your climate. But Kyrie, at the end of the day, he went against the grain. He went against the grain. I think it got too tiring for the Nets. And pretty much when he got into making those statements about certain religious groups or just about a documentary, it became the straw that broke the horse's back.
Was that essentially like the whole situation with the COVID? Was that like the last straw, or were there other straws?
I mean, I was just trying to enjoy, the time that I had with some of my good friends and my peers in Brooklyn with James and KD and some young guys that we drafted. Well, we had a plan in place, and when plans change for individuals, and that happens again in any business, you got to make the best decision for you and your family. So again, when you have that eye-to-eye communication with your teammates and people on staff, and you're able to articulate how you feel, it shouldn't matter what's being said about you on the outside. And being in New York, being in the media capital of the world, it's the most political place in the world, other than like LA or overseas places. But
yeah, he's right about that. It's all about the optics. It's all about the optics. And we're definitely seeing the game of optics play out with the New York mayor trying to look like the good guy by accepting all those migrants. And now he's crying victim when the situation pretty much is out of his hands, is out of control.
I think that people carry or hold on to the weight of my words, and I'm not trying to put anybody in that predicament here or in Brooklyn. So I'm just really trying to move past that, man, and hopefully everybody does the same.
And I hope the Nets do look past it too, because at the end of the day, I believe the Nets ownership sighing with their general manager over their star players might end up coming to bite them in the ass, because the Nets got to realize they're not an organization where superstars like Kevin Durant are going to just flock to. They're not a destination. Even though they're in the New York City market, they're not a destination. And the Nets owner definitely sighed with his GM over Kyrie Irving. And I don't know what's the deal that they struck with Kevin Durant, but after he signed his extension and them not willing to extend Kyrie, KD ended up asking for a trade. So I don't know if they made a handshake deal where the KD package basically came with Kyrie. But at the end of the day, this thing ended up in a complete shit show, and there was never going to be a middle ground. Either this was going to end very well for the Nets, or this was going to end very bad. But the two friends from the city, I wish them well in their endeavors. KD up in Phoenix and Kyrie down in Dallas. And before I get out of here, you guys definitely don't forget to check out the description below. Hit up the mailbag. Leave me a voicemail with your questions. I'll feature it as a segment on the show. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.